My name is Burcu Keane, and I'm the assistant curator history here at Queen Victoria Museum and Art Gallery. And thank you, first of all, for inviting me to speak today. It's a real pleasure to be here among fellow enthusiasts of Tasmanian history, science, and culture. Today, I will take you on a little journey. The story of a company that started right here in Launceston and went on to make its mark on international sport, regional industry, and Tasmanian identity, the Alexander Patent Racket Company. I have to start with saying that this isn't just a story about rackets. It's a story about innovation, craftsmanship, community, and resilience. It's about how a small factory on the banks of the Tamar became a symbol of ingenuity and why its legacy matters today. So I will tell you, we will start with the whole tennis history, if you like, as best as I can. And all this, full disclosure here, I am hoping to pick up tennis one day. Either not play it at all, probably for the rest of my life, or play with a wooden racket. So let's start. Tennis has come a long way from its origins in medieval France, where it began as, pardon my French, jeu de paume, literally game of the palm. Players struck a ball with their hands before rackets appeared in the 16th century. This evolved into real or royal tennis, an indoor game beloved by Australian aristocracy. Modern lawn tennis emerged in England during the 1870s, complete with codified rules and the first Wimbledon championship in 1877. Tasmania embraced lawn tennis almost immediately. There is evidence of play in Hobart as early as 1876, and by 1892, Tasmanian Lawn Tennis Association had formed. In the north, competitive play took off with the founding of the Launceston Lawn Tennis Club and the launch of the Tasmanian Lawn Tennis Championships in 1893, making Launceston an early hub for the sport. Now let's talk a little bit about a state in transition. The early 20th century was a time of profound change for Tasmania, shaped by federation, economic volatility, and industrial ambition. After federation in 1901, Tasmania lost its ability to levy customs duties, a major resource of revenue. This fiscal blow even sparked secessionist sentiment, culminating in the Tasmanian Secession League in 1931. These dates are important. We will come back to them. So this is the history that I'd like you to keep in mind. Yet, federation also introduced interstate free trade, allowing Tasmanian manufacturers to sell goods across Australia without tariff barriers, a critical advantage for firms like Alexander Patent Racket Company, which was founded in Launceston in 1925. At the time, Tasmania's manufacturing sector was modest, focused mainly on food processing, textiles, and timber. Alexander Patent stood out as one of the few companies producing high-end consumer goods for export. Globally, tennis equipment market was fiercely competitive. British giants like Slazenger and Dunlop dominated Europe. Spalding led in North America, and French rackets were considered premium imports. In fact, Alexander's founders initially imported French rackets before developing their own. Locally, a handful of backyard producers tried their luck, but imported brands were seen as superior, colonial production simply wasn't considered up to the standard. Against this backdrop, Alexander Patent pioneered the world's first laminated tennis racket, patented in 1921. Previously, I have to point out, this is near the cricket oval, the first tennis court in Launceston. This is the grounds of the Alexander Patent Racket Company. You might know Abbott and Wentworth Streets in Newstead. So, Great Depression. Let's talk a little bit. Oh, sorry, it's playing as I'm going to have to stop every time, probably. Great Depression beginning in 1929. So we are going to go a little bit further in history. Devastated Tasmania's agricultural and mining sectors, leading to widespread unemployment and social unrest. Yet Alexander Patent thrived by leveraging its niche and Tasmania's skilled timber craftsmanship. Their use of English ash was supported by Commonwealth trade preferences and relatively low duties on British goods. Is it possible to stop the play and control it through just me? We'll go back a little bit in history. Here we are. So meanwhile, the establishment of Commonwealth Grants Commission in 1933 began channeling financial support to disadvantaged states like Tasmania, indirectly aiding industrial development and infrastructure, including rail and port facilities that supported exporters. To put the scale in perspective, an estimated 127,000 rackets were imported by the end of 1929. But by 1931, that number had dropped to 19,700. So by the mid-1930s, Alfred Alexander's company, Alexander Patent Racket Company, had become a symbol of Tasmanian ingenuity, a company which had not only survived the Depression, but expanded its reach. So who were the founders? We'll go back. This is an early Alexander prototype, racket prototype. Alexander Patent Racket Company was founded in 1925 by Alfred Alexander, a cabinet maker turned inventor. In 1918, a 33-year-old furniture maker, Alfred, took up a teaching position at Launceston's Technical College, while taking a course at Teachers Training College in Hobart, and for the first time in his life, found his day's work finishing at 3 o'clock. What we can do with that, all that time after that. So he took up tennis. When the time came to buy his own racket, however, cost came into the equation, where a good racket would have cost him over £3. That's when Alfred thought it would be better and cheaper to make one for himself, and thought he could make a better one. After all, thanks to his background in fine woodworking, he had a deep understanding of timber. Soon after, back. Soon after a chance meeting between Walter Miller, Alfred's headmaster at the technical school, and Stephen Hopwood, the leading retailer of books, stationery, and sporting goods, sparked a conversation about a young teacher's attempts at racket making. In 1922, Hopwood & Co. on Brisbane Street served as Alexander's retail outlet, and Stephen Hopwood's keen business mind, experience in the retail industry, and contacts in the sporting goods manufacturer provided Alexander Rackets with the initial support and invaluable launching platform. Hopwood became a founding director of Alexander Company. Another key figure, this is Hopwood, Alfred Alexander. Now we're talking Bill Sheehan. Another key figure in the success of the company was Bill Sheehan. Born in Cressy, I'm not sure why this is constantly continuing when I'm not present. Born in Cressy, northern Tasmania, William Joseph Sheehan was educated by the Jesuits, spoke Latin and ancient Greek, and was an accomplished all-round sportsman, excellent in rowing, boxing, football, and of course, tennis. He wasn't just a casual player. Sheehan won numerous club singles and state titles, including 1921 and 1923, earning a place among Tasmania's sporting elite. Before joining Alexander, Sheehan worked as an accountant for the Launceston City Council. In 1927, he became the company's business manager, and his impact was transformative. Sheehan introduced innovative marketing strategies, strengthened the brand's identity, and most importantly, traveled the world to connect Alexander with tennis's elite. Through his efforts, a small Tasmanian factory gained international recognition, placing Tasmania firmly on the map as an industry leader. So what made these rackets unique? From the very beginning, Alexander was driven by one big idea. How can we make rackets better? In the 1920s, that ambition led to a radical innovation, patented design for the dry bend laminated tennis racket. So what does that mean? Traditionally, racket frames were shaped by steaming timber. But that process created weak points, especially at the head of the racket. Alfred Alexander and his brother Douglas Davy Alexander came up with something completely different. Their method involved building the rim entirely from thin strips of timber. I'd like to do a little bit of a show and tell here. Is that props? We're talking this thin. Alternating long and cross-grain layers, sometimes using flexible materials like calf hide. These strips were glued and tightly secured together, and here's the clever part, all without steam. The strips were long enough to extend down into the handle, creating a frame that was stronger, more balanced, and far less prone to warping. In fact, the principle was similar to what engineers were using to make airplane propeller blades at the time. The result? Rackets with perfect balance, standard size, shape, powerful driving force, tremendous strength, and no warping. At first, they experimented with Tasmanian woods, all sorts of Australian timbers, including Tasmanian blackwood, but found them too heavy. So they imported ash from America and mainly England, the only part of the racket not made in Launceston. And Alexander didn't just innovate design, they transformed production. When the factory first opened, it produced about 72 rackets a week. After expanding new set site, installing specialized equipment like sanders, planers, gang saws, and polishers, output soared to over 1,000 rackets a week. And Alfred personally trained local workers in this new patented process. These weren't specialist artisans from overseas. They were Tasmanians learning cutting-edge skills. Even with all the new machinery, much of the finishing and stringing was still done entirely by hand, preserving craftsmanship in every racket. By 1926, the company had produced 60,000 rackets and trained 130 employees, none of whom had prior experience in racket making. Demand kept growing, and in 1928, the factory was extended again to separate the finishing department. Processes like lining, polishing, and applying decals, which were transfers, were still done by hand and needed dust-free conditions to protect the racket's distinctive branding. So to solve this, Alexander invested in mechanization and technology, always looking ahead to ensure long-term success. But it wasn't just a workplace. Alexander Factory wasn't a place where rackets were made. It was a community. Dozens of workers were employed there, many trained in the intricate skills of stringing and finishing rackets. These weren't simple tasks. They required precision, patience, and a steady hand. Photographs from 1950s show rows of workers, heads bent in concentration, carefully crafting products. Sorry, this is, by the way, some of the decals and transfers. My slides are slightly out of sync. I'm having to go back and forth. Apologies for this. I am not sure how this will affect the rest of the presentation. We'll carry on. So they were crafting products that would end up on the courts far beyond Tasmania. These images are powerful reminders that behind every racket was a person, and that industrial heritage is as much about human stories as it is about machines and patents. The company fostered a real sense of pride among its workforce. Many employees stayed for years, and their stories live on through oral histories and family archives. This social dimension is often overlooked in an industrial history, but it's essential. The Alexander story isn't just about innovation and production, it's about people, their skills, the community they build around this shared purpose. Alexander's global success was always grounded in local pride. For Launceston and Tasmania as a whole, the company became a symbol of what was possible. It proved that innovation didn't have to come from Sydney or Melbourne. It could come from a small factory on the banks of Tamar. One of Alexander's most forward-thinking contributions was his commitment to women and junior players. At a time when tennis was largely dominated by men, Alexander recognized that if women and children were to play a better game and compete at high levels, they needed the equipment designed for them. So the company developed rackets that were slightly shorter, lighter in weight, and featured smaller grips to suit younger and smaller hands. These changes weren't just cosmetic, they were practical innovations that gave women and juniors the confidence to play with skill and comfort. To reinforce this inclusive approach, Bill Sheehan introduced special school models to the Alexander line. The company donated rackets for junior and senior handicap competitions, and these rackets featured customized color branding to match school colors, along with individualized transfers bearing the school's name, like Broadland House, and their logo. At the time, racket branding was usually very plain. They were quite boring. But Sheehan understood that to stand out in a competitive market, Alexander needed to respond to grassroots player and make a visual impact. Result? Striking, decorative designs that made Alexander rackets highly desirable for players of all ages and levels. This combination of technical innovation and cultural connection helped Alexander compete globally while nurturing the local talent and pride and it was a vision that linked Tasmania to the world and empowered communities at home. As Alexander grew, so did its ambitions. The company didn't stop at tennis. It branched into squash, badminton, and even royal tennis. This was an aristocratic sport with highly specialized equipment requirements. And I've got one example here. You're welcome to have a look at it after the presentation. And from 1931, Alexander began producing cricket bats, followed by golf clubs and hockey sticks in 1932. This level of diversification was unusual. Most sporting goods manufacturers stuck to one or two products. Alexander's ability to deliver high-quality equipment across multiple sports speaks volumes about its technical ability, but also its adaptability. The company also understood the power of branding. It produced branded presses for badminton rackets, promotional souvenir mirrors, and signature rackets endorsed by top players. These weren't just functional items, they were part of a broader strategy to make Alexander a name people recognized and trusted. By the 1930s, Alexander's cricket bats, crafted from willow grown in Longford, Relbia, and other parts of Tasmania, were celebrated for their quality, balance, and appearance. They were endorsed by elite cricketers such as Alan Kippax, Stan McCabe, members of the Australian 11, and even Don Bradman. These endorsements weren't just a marketing spin. They reflected the genuine trust in Alexander's craftsmanship. Players chose them because they worked and because they were made with care. One particularly fascinating object in the Alexander 100 exhibition is a royal tennis racket. I think we've just passed it. There we go. This one. Made as a gift for Lord Somers, Governor of Victoria, upon his departure from Australia in 1931. Commissioned by the Royal Melbourne Tennis Club, this racket is possibly the only example of a royal tennis racket ever manufactured by Alexander. Royal tennis rackets have a distinctively bent head, almost like a pear, designed to strike balls close to the floor or in corners and to facilitate slice or cut shots. This bespoke piece is a testament to Alexander's prestige and its ability to meet even the most specialized demands. So Alexander rackets weren't just popular. They were trusted by some of Australia's greatest players, including Jack Crawford, Jim Willard, and J.O. Anderson. In 1935 book, How to Improve Your Tennis, A.V. Doyle wrote, "The latest Cressy Wizard model is an absolute triumph for Australian craftsmanship and reflects the highest credit of the makers. I have not seen a better finish on any of the overseas rackets." Crawford, in particular, was loyal to Alexander Cressy Wizard flat top racket. These are some of the players that endorsed Alexander's brand. We've moved a bit too far again. This was a name designed in honor of Norman Brooks, Wimbledon winning nickname, the Wizard. This racket was a bold departure from traditional oval shape. And it wasn't just about looks. The flat top increased the effective size of the playing surface by eliminating short strings, improving control, and adding greater liveliness to every stroke. In short, it gave players a technical edge. With this racket in hand, I would like to show you an example from our exhibition. here. With this racket in hand, Jack Crawford dominated the game. He won his first Australian title in 1931, followed by victories in 1932, 1933, and 1935. And in fact, in 1933, after claiming the Australian Championship, the French Championship, the Wimbledon, Crawford became the third Australian to win Wimbledon. And his racket earned the reputation of being a world record breaker. Only the US Championship stood between him and the first ever Grand Slam. He didn't quite make it. But he came within one match of achieving that historic feat, all with his trusty Alexander flat-top racket. Crawford's success and international reputation elevated Alexander's profile and gave Tasmania a moment of global recognition. The company's products were exported across Australia and overseas to New Zealand, England, France, Germany, Sweden, USA, Canada, Japan, South Africa, and more. The list goes on. Promotional materials like souvenir mirrors and branded rackets help build a local, loyal customer base. Alexander proved that regional manufacturer could compete with international brands and win. One of the most forward-thinking initiatives by the Alexander Company came in 1930s with the creation of Ash Plantations Limited. Why ash? Because ash timber was the lifeblood of racket production. It was strong, flexible, and light, making it the perfect tennis, badminton, and making perfect rackets. To secure this vital source, the company acquired 170 acres of land about 20 kilometers northeast of Launceston in an area known as Hollybank. At the time, no commercial ash plantation existed anywhere in the Commonwealth, making this a truly pioneering venture. By the end of 1936, an impressive 62,250 ash trees had been planted, 62,000, with the goal of creating a sustainable local supply of timber. But nature had other plans. Ash thrives in deep alluvial soils, and Hollybank soils were too acidic. Moisture was a problem, and the trees were possibly planted too close together, stunning their growth. Despite the ambition, these environmental challenges proved insurmountable, and the project was abandoned in 1950. I think I'm just going to let it run its course. Although plantations never fulfilled their promise, the effort reflects a mindset that I would like to pay your attention to, and I think we can learn from it today. Investing in local resources to build resilience against uncertainty. In many ways, Ash Plantations Limited was ahead of its time, anticipating sustainability principles decades before they became mainstream. By 1936, Alexander Patent Racket Company was at its peak. Profits had topped £6,000, and 1937 they climbed over 8,000, the highest pre-war earnings the company would ever see. The same year, Alexander was proudly listed on the Launceston Stock Exchange, 1936, a milestone for a Tasmanian enterprise competing on the world stage. The company continued to maintain its high-profile sponsorships with superstar players, and in response to growing competition, it introduced a clever design, new design, the semi-flat top racket. This hybrid combined the traditional round top shape with this enormously successful flat top range. Alongside this, Alexander launched a synchrotron finish, giving decals and transfers superior quality. A small detail, but one that made a big visual impact. Then came a surprising innovation, the banjo mandolin. Using the same laminating and machining techniques as racket frames, Alexander ventured into musical instruments, possibly the first design influenced by a tennis racket. Given the factory's expertise in shaping timber frames, this bold move was probably less strange than it sounds today. But 1937 brought tragedy. Alfred Alexander, the technical mastermind behind many of company's productional methods, fell ill and died from complications of bronchial pneumonia. His loss was deeply felt. And before its death, Alfred had been approached by US tennis champion Ellsworth Vines, who expressed interest in co-manufacturing Alexander rackets in America. So a tantalizing opportunity that never fully materialized. In 1939, General Manager Bill Sheehan embarked on a 5-month business tour of America, Canada, and New Zealand to pursue this vision. It was a risky time to travel, with the shadow of the Second World War looming. The war soon disrupted everything. Global trade faltered, orders became irregular, turnover dropped, enlistments drained the workforce. 40% of the factory staff left for the war effort. And timber supplies from England grew scarce. But determined to continue, Alexander sought defense contracts, producing military equipment such as ammunition boxes, which we have again in one of which is in our exhibition, latrine poles, which we don't have, and even tendered unsuccessfully for aircraft parts and lightweight collapsible assault boats. Yet amid these changes, the company still found ways to support morale, exporting tennis frames and gut to South Africa, southern Rhodesia, Egypt, and the Belgian Congo, where Australian troops and other forces could enjoy a game of tennis far from home. They weren't just serving aces, they were serving their country as well. Post-war economic boom brought back the optimism and a return to somewhat normal production for sporting goods industry. Big names like Dunlop, Slazenger, and Spalding bounced back quickly, and they had an advantage. The patent taken out by Alexander Brothers in 1921 had expired, meaning other manufacturers could now freely use Alexander's pioneering laminated method for making tennis, squash, and badminton rackets. Then came another challenge, the rise of plastics. Plastics were lighter, stronger, and more durable than wood, which meant rackets lasted longer and tennis became cheaper. For Alexander, this was a major blow. In 1949, the company faced a turning point when Bill Sheehan retired at the age of 74. For 2 decades, Sheehan's international contracts and his flair for distinctive decorative branding defined Alexander rackets. His departure left a gap that was really hard to fill. The new manager, A.W. Rushforth, tried to diversify, which is an interesting story in itself. I always wondered what would have happened if actually he did succeed. Spotting a post-war shortage in new furniture, he diverted part of the workforce to produce Tasmanian oak hardwood furniture. I mean, lamination is everywhere right now. In all our furniture, today it's still used. So this venture unfortunately, was short-lived for them. Alexander was registered as a sporting goods manufacturer and lacked the proper license for furniture production. So to avoid penalties and hostility from the Furniture Makers Guild, the department was closed. In 1951, the company invested heavily in factory extensions. So the existing factory that you know today in Newstead is the current, it was extended last in 1951, which added a 21-meter frontage and this extended sawtooth roof. But despite borrowing to finance these upgrades, their production methods remained largely unchanged. Alexander's process was still labor-intensive, while competitors embraced mechanized production, cutting-edge technology. Another thing to note, meanwhile, was happening was that the style of play, of game, was changing too. Tennis was becoming faster and more powerful, demanding stronger frames and advanced synthetic glue. Rival companies were pouring resources into research and development, leaving Alexander behind. Losses began in 1956, and by 1958, the company delisted from the stock exchange. Talks with Spalding about purchasing the new factory proved unsuccessful, and in 1961, Alexander went into liquidation. This is a very short story long or long story short. I'm not sure. But after many years of uncertainty following this, the factory found a new purpose. In 1968, it became the headquarters for the Police Citizens Youth Club, PCYC, an organization providing sporting and recreational facilities for all ages. And then decades later, in 2009, the building was officially recognized for its historical significance and added to the Tasmanian Heritage Register, a lasting tribute to its role in Tasmania's industrial story. I'm going to move back and back and back to here. This was the company before its demise. Well, not liquidation. At the end of August, QVMAG launched Alexander 100, an exhibition marking the centenary of the Alexander Patent Racket Company. From the start, our goal was clear. We didn't just want to display objects. We wanted to tell a story. Thanks to generous donors like Christopher Gus Green, we've been able to assemble a rich collection of objects and memories that truly reflect this community. The exhibition features over 50 items, from early Cressy and Red Seal rackets to promotional mirrors, trophies, and even a converted Iron Age cedar cultivator, which was right in the middle here, used as a vintage court line marker. The gallery space was designed to evoke the atmosphere of a tennis court, complete with a soundscape. You will hear it, hopefully, when you go there next door soon. Complete with a soundscape, bench-style seating, and a court outline on the floor. But the real heart of the exhibition is its people. We've included a rotating screen of factory workers, local audiences enjoying the game. These are some of its images. And many community contributions, elements that help visitors connect with the story on a personal level. The exhibition is a perfect example of why community exhibitions matter. And I've talked about this at our last or previous all-staff meeting because I truly believe in its value. At QVMAG, we are proud, and this also again feeds into the debate of why museums exist today. Why are they still relevant? What makes them still relevant? At QVMAG, we are proud to host major touring exhibitions and big name shows. Don't take me wrong, we are very proud. They bring in visitors, they raise our profile, they connect us to national and international conversations. But community exhibitions like this one are equally important. They ground us, they remind us who we are and where we come from. They build relationships with local audiences and give space to voices that might otherwise be unheard. Community exhibitions foster a sense of belonging. They invite people to see themselves in our galleries, not just as visitors, but as contributors to the story. They spark intergenerational conversations, they trigger memories. They create moments of recognition and pride. People come in through the doors and say, I have one. Oh, my uncle told me about this company. And often they uncover hidden stories that enrich our understanding of the past. The response to Alexander 100 has been warm, enthusiastic, and deeply personal. We've had generous contributions from local collectors and families who still treasure their Alexander rackets. It's a reminder that museums aren't just about preserving the past, it's about connecting people to it. Curating Alexander 100 has been a process of rediscovery, uncovering stories, innovations, and connections that continue to surprise. Along the way, we've added a modern twist. During a talk, I'll tell you a little story. During a talk, well, another little story, I gave at the Tennis Heritage Australia National Meeting here in Launceston. I had the privilege of meeting Rod Groom, a leading tennis coach from Burnie, with over 18 years of experience. Each year, Rod travels to many of the world's top tennis championships as racket service technician, working with elite players to ensure their equipment performs at their best. Beyond that, he's developed a special range of strings and even created the world's first machine capable of checking all critical aspects of a racket's construction: weight, balance, and feel. I'm not taking any commissions from Rod. I just want to tell you this story because I was curious. When I met him, I had to talk to him, and I was curious because I was curious about how Alexander's craftsmanship compared to today's technology. I asked Rod to test the Alexander Cressy racket against modern rackets, models. So just yesterday, he sent me the results. This comparison graph of the Cressy alongside two contemporary rackets. And I have his email just sent yesterday to me. I had to print it out, didn't have the time to add it to the presentation. But he wanted me to pass on to you these information. It's very technical, I have to admit. I had to call him to find out, to make sense of it, and for him to give me a handing help with its interpretation. So basically why we compared these rackets to Alexander wood laminate technology became, as you found out, one of the most sought after and player frames in 1920s to 40s. Here we have a Wilson racket first, acknowledged #1 player's racket by World Tennis Magazine in 1985. Which is 50 years later than Cressy. So this racket was used by many great players like Samoras, Edberg, and Federer throughout their brilliant careers. So we wanted to start with a good one. A little bit of technical background. The machine, he's called it Flex Infinity Racket Analysis Method. Has the ability to measure all aspects of racket design. The graph outlines, it measures frame stiffness values along its length and different positions. So you can see position 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 8, different locations he's tested. Torsional stiffness value, measurement of twisting on off-center impacts, radial stiffness, measurement of stiffness across the 3 and 9 o'clock position, higher value. So he actually gave me a description of what each position and why they're tested. In case any of you would like to find out more later on, please come and find me. I've got all of the details. So the higher the value, it creates a better response and better tension maintenance of the string bed. And why do we need to know these engineering values? In search of excellence. So, for example, measurements of flex stiffness index 7 positions can be used to engineer different stiffness values, which in turn affects the nodal values, which is the sweet spot, and the node of vibration value. So how the comfort to the strike sensation felt by the player, in our terms. And player's contact point varies with ability. Majority of great players' strike point is above the geometric center of the string bed, apparently. So I will keep telling you about this other one that he's tested, which is a head pro stock racket. It's a more flexible player's frame. Pro stock means specifically they're made for pro tour players and not available retail. This racket, pro stock, this one, became a dominant player's racket in 2000 and maybe preferred the player's racket after St. Vincent's Pro Staff Wilson. So the current dominated brand is Babolat, made famous by Nadal and Alcaraz. But I wanted to ask him, what's your conclusion? So we're looking at these graphs. All I can see is these two lines. One is Cressy, one is the other racket, and to me they look very similar. All these positions that he's mentioning, Cressy is overall 31% more flexible. Here it says positions that are 280% more flexible than St. Vincent. So what does that mean? And he said, you're right. It is interesting how similar the curves are. Modern materials are stiffer, no doubt. And power is a factor of stiffness. Some great players, though, still prefer flexible rackets. They feel they can attack the ball with more vigor and still retain control. And to manufacture a laminated wood racket to today's racket size heads would be too great. The rackets today are larger at the head. I think this is fascinating. I mean, this is literally last-minute news in tennis history. Nobody has ever compared a wooden laminated racket, let alone an Alexander racket, with current rackets in terms of playability and strength and balance and before. This is a first. So this is fascinating because it just shows how advanced Alexander's design was for its time and how it still holds its own against today's engineering. These rackets were strung by hand, not even machines. Now I'm going to come to the ending of my talk. I want to say thank you, but in an era of globalization and industrial decline, Alexander's story offers a powerful model for regional resilience. It proves that a small-scale, high-quality, locally rooted enterprise can thrive, and innovation doesn't have to come from big cities or multinational corporations. It reminds us why heritage matters. Preserving stories like Alexander's isn't about nostalgia, it's about understanding who we are and where we come from. It's about recognizing the ingenuity that exists within our communities and using it to inspire future generations. And finally, it's about identity. The Alexander Patent Racket Company helped shape Tasmania's reputation. It's not just as a place of natural beauty, but as a center of creativity, craftsmanship, and excellence. When I look back on the story of the Alexander Patent Racket Company and the exhibition, I see more than a tale of craftsmanship and sporting success. I see a blueprint for resilience, a reminder that qualities which carried Alexander through the boom years and war years are the same qualities we need today. Innovation, adaptability, deep sense of place are not just historical values, they remain the keys to thriving in a world that is constantly changing. This exhibition isn't only about preserving the past, it's about connecting people to it, drawing lessons that can shape Tasmania's future. In celebrating Alexander, we celebrate the spirit of possibility that still lives here. Thank you. I look forward to your questions, but before I do, I would like to say a huge thank you to Christopher Gus Green, who is the mastermind and the brain behind this amazing research, which I have quoted over and over again. His book is called What a Racket. He is descendant from the founders of the company, and I cannot thank him enough. He is a legend. I'm not sure what else to say. I had really hoped to see him here, but we catch up regularly, so that's okay. And of course, the QVMAG team, curatorial collections, exhibitions, design, Marcoms. None of this was achieved by myself. For the exhibition, we collaborated with so many people: Tennis Tasmania, Tennis Heritage Australia, Tucker's Tennis Museum, Albury Live Beer Museum, who kindly lent us 2 amazing trophies, one of which is an Australia Cup from 1905 to 1914. This is an immensely valuable trophy and immensely significant trophy. In my opinion, it's the birth certificate of Australian tennis. It shows, and it's never been displayed together with the current trophy. So hopefully one day that will happen. And, but it's an incredible trophy. The existing Wimbledon trophy is based on the design of this Australia Cup. So you will immediately recognize it. And please go see it. We've got so many other amazing objects in the exhibition. So thank you to everybody who's contributed and made it possible.
Well, what a wonderful local story, beautifully told, and a powerful reminder of the importance of QVMAG. So our liaison with QVMAG has always been strong, and may we ever continue to support them. So to questions, please.
Yes, please.
What happens to the Alexander company?
The company went into liquefaction in 1961, like I said. So that was it. But I have recently, Sue Alexander, the granddaughter of Alfred Alexander, came to visit us from Victoria. and was really touched by the exhibition. She said she found out so many things that she didn't know about her own family, because Alfred had passed away by the time she was born. And so the story, I think in my head, the story goes on. The building is still there. I'm sure it's going to be there when we, well, hopefully, when we are no longer. And it will have, who knows, many, many more new lives. Yes?
Thank you for your talk. It's an absolutely wonderful talk.
If you wait for the microphone.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for your talk. I really enjoyed it. I was so fascinated. I was trying to think where this factory was, and I couldn't believe it when you said it was the P&C Club, which I've been in so many times, and I had no idea. And I'm actually thinking, did I miss something? Do they have anything in the foyer that gives any idea of the history of the Alexander racket? Is there something I've missed?
Yes,
Oh,
there
good.
was. There used to be an exhibition, a display outside where some of the rackets, before they were donated to us, some of the even rackets, golf clubs, hockey sticks, other memorabilia were donated to us by Gus Green. Among other objects, there was a little display there right at the entrance to the building.
Oh.
And interestingly, quite if I may go back, this is Gus Green in 2007 in the factory. So quite a lot of the fabric of the building is preserved. It's still there. And the office spaces, I haven't been up in the office spaces, but apparently even some other like safes and things like that are still there. Sliding doors. There will have to be, I'm hoping there will have to be a new life. I think PCYC is vacating the building, so there will be a new life for it, I'm sure of it.
Thank you.
And there's the Alexander sign on the front of it as well that Gus found underneath.
Yes, the original Alexander, big right in big. So the letters. I think there was an image with the company. So many slides. So the letters were preserved and kept. Here we go. So the writing is still there, and they were put back. That's right. Yes. So, yes, hopefully.
Just a quick one.
Yes.
My father was a director of that company, but I have no record of the shareholding, and you mentioned the stock exchange.
Yes.
Are there any records in the community history that might tell us who owned the shares and
Yes, there.
that side of the business rather than the manufacturing?
Yes, so the book, at the end of the book, there's quite a lot of information, including from the stock exchange when it was listed, and some, the full list of the workers and the shareholders I haven't come across, because I wanted to find out the full list, but it of course changed over years.
Gus Green couldn't tell me when he wrote that book.
Oh, see, yes.
I just wondered if the museum had it.
We do have records of Alexander, but not one of the full list of shareholders that I am aware of. It exists over time, at some time periods, but the time period you're after, I'm not sure. And it's interesting to say that the company at one point reached a number of almost 200 workers. So it started small, but then definitely gradually increased in numbers with variations through wartime and everything.
One of the other directors of the company was Mr. Hughes from
Yes.
Launceston Flower.
Yes, Mr. Hughes' story is in here.
Thank you for your talk, very interesting. And I guess when I look at those graphs, my observation is that it is the craft skill versus a science skill, which is very appropriate for this organisation, I think, to be seeing how someone approaching it as a craft, the woodworking, the skill there, it being intrinsic versus perhaps the modern scientific. But my question is really, you spoke initially about the major blocks, BLOCS, of tennis makers, the Europeans, the Americans, and the French was the premium, you said. So to get a racket from Australia, even though it had the technical expertise, the craft knowledge embedded in the science implicitly, what was the role of the tennis ambassador? Did we need someone to win Wimbledon or a major tournament, say I'm using an Alexander racket, to really get us to that level of the international market rather than being a domestic or local market? And if so, where did those role ambassadors come from? Because you mentioned that Mr. Sheehan spent months travelling the world. Now, I imagine he was more than a salesman. What he was trying to do was to develop a brand ambassador. And who were they and what's their role been in both the rise and then the demise of the Alexander?
An excellent question. I think there's so many facets to the answer. I can definitely say that yes, the company did its best in terms of writing to the Prime Minister at the time, writing to the Department of Sports, the right people. They tried to, throughout their history, we have letters proving that they tried to connect and make some noise among the right circles to get their story out there and to get the support they would have needed to make their name. They had complete trust in their product, so that was no doubt. But at times, as you know, tennis rackets production, England was the main source at that they were the only importers at one point. So they actively tried to block by adding a duty, customs duty, to imports to England. They tried to block the efforts of Alexander rackets being sold in England, back to England. So there was always this back and forth between Alexander's efforts and various, not only companies, but countries among the world. And they wrote about this to various people at the time. And when they were struggling in the 50s, they again wrote saying that the duties, the tax is too high. Can there be anything done to help the supporting goods in manufacturing in Australia? So they did try their best, but yes, endorsements worked like magic. And it does today, still. So when a tennis star makes its mark, it's not just England that hears it, it's not just America that hears it, the world is watching. And everyone wants then suddenly a piece of it. They want to know how he did it. Everyone wants to know how he did it. How did Jack Crawford did it? So, and then of course, what was the racket? Why did he play with that racket? Where was it made? How was it made? Can we make it? So all these questions, and you instantly get that recognition, instantly get that your name out there, without doing anything. But they also did their bit. They went and traveled the world, visiting exhibitions. They made promotional rackets larger than a man, and carried it across the strait to Melbourne, to exhibitions, to Tasmania, Made in Tasmania exhibition here. They had a huge stand. And so they did have to do both their bit and try to connect. And yes, it is a big, when they wanted to diversify into other goods, cricket, hockey, they made connections. They started with making the right connections and sending their bats, say, what, does this work? They approached people, they invited people to Launceston. So many tennis elites were invited to Launceston to visit the factory, see the processes, how it was done, but not just to visit the factory, but to be asked what they needed from their rackets. Jack Crawford apparently had huge hands. And he, one of the stringers story tells, I think his name is Ellis, he said that he was stringing his racket, it had to be the leather wrapping around the handle had to be specially custom made, not just the strings. So every part of the, Don Bradman says, I have tried this and it works this way, it's stiff over here, works like that. So they tried to understand, again, they tried to understand how they could make their product better. And once they had that confidence, then there was nothing but left to do but make sure this was that they were heard.
I think it's working now. Thank you very much for a most enjoyable and inspiring lecture. I really appreciated it. I remember the factory as a working factory. I went to school in a school which was next door to it, which is no longer there. And I remember that year when they went into liquidation, and the sadness in the community was palpable. So a living memory here in my own head. One question I have, the expiry of the patent, how was it that they didn't renew the patent before it expired, as it were? What year did the patent expire?
I think it had a 25-year
life. Was it
life. Renewable? Because it was in 1921 that they got the first patent. So also there were many patents. So they changed their racket slightly after they had another patent in 26. They had another patent. So they added another, a support on the throat, neck. They called it an overlay. They patented that as well. But in 1946, their patent expired, pretty much, for
just after the war.
Yes, which changed everything, including the war, of course.
Yes, of course.
So, and back to your story about remembering Alfred, through the tours and floor talks that I had given, so many people have come to me with a similar story to yours, saying as a kid they remember running up to the factory and shouting, "Boomerang, boomerang," and the factory workers would open a window and throw these little pieces of strips of wood to the kids because they looked like boomerangs, the neck, the throat of the racket, a part of it, the one that you showed there, and they looked like, so they would throw boomerangs to these kids. Some other neighbor living close by remembers how I think at 3 or 4 o'clock this bell would ring and the whole valley would hear it. That marks the end of the working day. Right. Yes, numerous stories from people who have their treasured rackets up in the attic or somewhere in the house still. It's remarkable how many people have kept their rackets and had connections. So it's 130, 200, these are just numbers, 200 people, but in a smaller population, in a very close-knit, tight community, where everyone pretty much knows everyone else, the impact, like you said, of a company as big, when they had to close their doors, must have been enormous. And not just the company workers itself. They were working with so many other companies.
Yes.
So they had the distributor, they had the marketing, they had connected with the post. You know, these products don't just travel themselves. They actually had employed laborers, so many people from bringing the wood into Tasmania from England to exporting it back out to these countries. There are so many people involved that didn't just work in the factory itself. So, yes.
Time for one more question if there is, otherwise, sorry to bring it to a close, but I'm sure people have commitments.
I'll be here afterwards if you have any further questions.